Okay, so we'll get into our first presenter. This is Maddison Orpin-Patrick. She is from the Faculty of Health and is presenting on the influence of CBD on the psychosocial abilities of autistic adults. Thank you. I'll give you a 10-minute and then you'll have 5 minutes here.
Yeah. Is everyone good with hearing me? Is mine? Yeah, we're good. Everyone online can hear. Cool. Awesome. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I've had a shocking 12 months. So last year I presented nearly basically a finished review of reviews, which I will show you, but I've had some family troubles and just life in general. But I did confirm. I did finally confirm at the end of the year, yes. So I'm doing a Master's of Science by Research with the intent of upscaling into a PhD. And I had like this massive body of work and it was like, and I was super thrilled, but obviously life gets in the way and, see my little timeline. So I also just want to kind of, is everyone pretty like across the difference between like CBD and THC, as well as like understanding autism and all that kind of thing? Everyone's pretty good across. Do you guys want a little bit of a definition of what yep, let's do it. All right, so I just like to, obviously, I'm really bad at the country acknowledgement, but I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, past, present, and emerging, in which we congregate today on their land. I think that's okay. I'm sorry, I do apologise. So obviously I'm with the National Centre for Naturopathic Medicine, Faculty of Health, and cannabidoil, which is a private CBD supplier with a research licence. Actually also helped fund a lot of my work as well. And you would have seen on the previous slide, my beautiful supervisors are Dr. Janet Skoros and Dr. Kitty Foley, who is both here at USC, SCU. So obviously, I've got the definition up here for autism spectrum disorder and how it's defined both in the DSM-5 and also the more, accepted definition in the autistic community would be the WHO definition. And this is something that I've had to go back and forth a lot with in terms of how to refer to neurodiverse individuals throughout my research, while also still being able to get across the characteristics and traits and symptoms, or however you would like to say it, as well to be able to speak to the clinical community. So this is a big part of my research that took up a lot of time. And then obviously why have I skipped? I might have deleted it. Wow. Oh no, this is my current research in AS, like the current research. So obviously we're using a neurodiverse affirming practice, which is adopting a strength-based approach, which is something that I really do endeavour to do in the way I write and the way I present, but sometimes I just have to put it out there that sometimes we will use so much that's sometimes not ideal for a lot of people who are a part of the autistic community or have an autistic person within their life. Sorry, I'm still going to get my wording around it too sometimes. So the basis of the research for me was because I've come from like 8 years in community. So I've worked in complex mental health, disability services, been a case manager, on call, support coordinator, worked in houses. I've done it all, been it all, seen it all. And so that's why at the moment, a lot of the interventions that we have, there's a lot of behavioural interventions, but there's also a lot of pharmacological. But the pharmacological are very limited in their capabilities because we've got the over-prescribing of things like antipsychotics, antidepressants, S8 medication, restrictive practices. I don't know if any of you are really in the area. So yeah, we have a lot of off-label prescribing of medications to treat autistic characteristics, traits, and or behaviours. So why CBD? Now, it gets thrown around a lot. Some people think it's smoking marijuana. And yes, in some circumstances, there is, different types of legalised cannabis now where you get the CBD and the THC. Why CBD? Because I want it to be accessible in order to improve quality of life. There's no point treating symptoms, characteristics, and all these other things if you can't drive a car. can't operate certain machinery, can't do certain things. We want to break down those barriers. So that's why CBD. It's also currently being used across the board in terms of, you know, a lot of different things, like obviously chemo and stuff, sleeping disorders, a range of things that's pretty well tossed around at the moment. So the overview of my research, so again, I walked in with this huge body of work and I did the lit review, and I'm now have to go back because I've left it a year because of family, and I've now had to go back and do another year. So funny enough, this phase 1 and 2 is now like kind of phase 2 comes first. So I'm actually about to put my survey through ethics and go back and then see if there's anything new in the literature before I can publish my review of reviews. So yeah, these are my research questions from my COC and what we were looking at. Originally, there was also a third phase in here. That's now gone. That's going to be, so we're going to do a safety and efficacy trial as a phase 3. And then me and my supervisors decided for this COC, let's just do phase 1 and 2. For a whole PhD, we'll do a full randomized control trial, which is where I would like to eventually go. So obviously we have theoretical frameworks that underpin my whole thesis for this, which is evidence-based practice. Everyone's pretty aware of evidence-based practice. And then we have an inclusive research approach. Now this is specific to, it's by Aspire, and it's to do with practice-based guidelines for inclusion of autistic adults in research. And there's like 2 kind of different subcategories, like 7 subcategories for inclusion of autistic participants in research, and then also inclusion of study participants. And we've actually used that framework to help include, I guess, with our advisory board and everything like that. So that's how we kind of attacked the first one. We have an advisory board of autistic individuals from all different backgrounds, some with autistic children, that kind of helped me consult on my research and stuff, so that when I'm writing things and it's coming through, it's coming across to everyone in the best way possible, basically. And then also we have the subset categories for the criteria for when we're actually doing research with autistic individuals. We also have the promoting action on research implementation. So a big part of when I was looking at this, because obviously I want to upscale to PhD, is not just doing the research, but how do we get into practice? Because it's such a big passion of mine to get this into practice. And this is a very bigger framework than what you see on the screen here, but it's just a very basic on how we use evidence, context, and then we facilitate it and how that goes into eventually. And that's a lot of what I'll be writing to in the grand thesis down the end. So obviously I did start my lit review, as I said. It's been a year and I should have published it last year and I didn't, so now I've got to kind of go back. But that's okay, we all have those hurdles, and I'm actually quite excited to see if there's anything new to help me build on it. So originally this was my little Prisma flow diagram, and we ended up with all these autistic characteristics, traits and behaviours. So we took out THC, we didn't include it, only CBD trials. From memory, we ended up with, I think it was, hold on if I go back, it was 8 reviews of reviews, and I think I ended up with, from memory, as I haven't actually seen this for like 6 months, so I do apologise. I think it was ended up with like 7 actual randomized controlled trials, and maybe it was 1 case study regarding, and that's where we got all this data from. So again, it's pretty scarce still. A lot of the research had CBD, THC included in it, so we had to really take that out of the equation when we were doing this review, because we weren't looking at that portion. And as you can see, we have a lot of different stats here, but you can see there's good increases in the ones that I was most interested in was concomitant use of medications and the decreases, or the ceasing of medication, or it's staying the same. So staying the same is like, well, it's not getting any worse. They're not having to increase, so that's good. And with the decreasing of their other concomitant medication, that says antipsychotics, says antidepressants. I like to see that. That's what I was most interested in, as well as all these other characteristics. So I'm going to fast forward heaps. So we had the outcomes of this current one. As I said, it is a little out of date now. And we did have the biggest limitation being unable to extrapolate means for some of the characteristics because of the lack of research to be able to extrapolate means across all the data. And then I've got my survey protocol at the moment, which is my cross-sectional survey. So again, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at what are Australian autistic adults' perspectives of using CBD and what are the barriers. We've adapted it from a UK study, the autistic and non-autistic. And yeah, at the moment that's nearly done and we're going to go through ethics. I don't really have a lot more to say at the moment. As I said, I've had a long break from this, so it's probably a lot of the same stuff from last year. But if you have any questions about the research as a whole, I'm happy to answer it. But yeah. Thank you. And yeah, it goes on.
Thanks, Madison. Any comments or questions? Keep me fit.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Matt, it looks like it's going to be a really good study. And I'm just wondering, what's the neurophysiological case for using CBD in autistic syndrome?
Okay, so you're really tapping into my mind. As I said, I really haven't looked at this in a while, but it's to do with the endocannabinoid pathways, and basically ASD in literature and research has been shown to follow similar pathways to epilepsy. We now know that we use CBD to help treat epilepsy. It's quite effective. So it's basically my whole theory that I would like to hopefully see come back when I do my random control trial way in the future, is that physiological pathway following the same process. Again, we're not here to cure change. It's none of that. A lot of mine is reducing the current medications that people are on and providing an alternative solution. That's probably my biggest one. So I try to really get that across. Is there any other questions about it? No? We're good? Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, I missed the first few minutes and then I was hiding behind there, so I didn't distract you. So what, are you looking at any of the behaviours or are you only looking at concomitant medications?
No, we look at everything. My particular interest is that, and that's where I like to see the data, and particularly because of obviously my background, but we're looking at improving all different types of characteristic traits and behaviours. So we don't look at it as symptoms and deficits, we look at it characteristics, traits and behaviours. And that also spans, as the DSM-5 is quite vague on their, like if we go back to the very first slide, that is the DSM-5 basic, like that's their definition. And it's very, very limited, and people have measured autistic traits and behaviours and characteristics in so many different ways. So it's trying to marry them up also to get the data to align, if that makes sense. So some people say in this way or that way, or they perceive it in a different way. And every autistic person's experience to the world and how they view the world and what they believe is a challenge is going to be different to the next. And I think that's the hardest thing to try and marry up. But we're looking at, like, obviously your main ones that I've looked at in clinic is kind of where I sit, but we're also being very sensitive to the autistic perspective and understanding that it all comes in all different shapes and sizes, and it is a spectrum, and there's a reason for that. But we do, I guess for me, I sit on them all, like trying to keep it very clinical in the way I report, but still being sensitive. So yeah, we are looking at it across the board.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Thank you very much, guys.